Okay, I am going to go ahead and call the roll to establish a quorum. Nicole?
Here.
Okay. Michelle?
Here.
Dawn is not. Rodney? Does not look like Rodney is on. Robbie is not on. Benji?
Here.
And Paul? Okay.
Here.
Having established a quorum, I hereby call the News Charter School Board of Directors meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. on November 24th, 2020. I will now read the ethics statement. The ethics statement for North Carolina state government. This is a conflict of interest reminder per North Carolina General Statute 138A-15E. Board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Okay. Next is reading and approval of the minutes. We can read these aloud or silently, or if everyone has read them, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second. This is Michelle Denning. Second.
Great. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Jane, just to make sure, this is the minutes for the last regular board meeting.
For the last regular board meeting and the special meeting, they were both.
Okay. Can we vote on those separately?
Okay, sure. So for the last regular meeting then. Okay, any corrections to the minutes from the last regular monthly meeting? Okay, there is a motion to approve those. All in favor, and I will go through the roll. Nicole?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Benji?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Those minutes have been approved. Now we can read the minutes from the special meeting aloud or silently, or if everyone has read them, I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
A
Booker.
second?
Second, it's Paul.
Great. Any corrections to the minutes from the special meeting? Okay, hearing none, I will move forward with a roll call for the vote. Nicole?
Aye.
Michelle?
I'm going to abstain from the vote on these minutes because I was not at the meeting, and if we could just let the minutes reflect that I abstained from the vote.
Okay. Benji?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I will actually vote aye as well, so that we have 4 votes in favor of those minutes being approved. So those minutes are officially approved. Okay, the next thing is public comment. Brad, do we have anyone who wants to make a public comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, moving on, we are going to have guest discourse, and we actually have two people who will be speaking during this time. The first is Dr. Brian Carpenter, who will be doing a micro training for the board. Dr. Carpenter? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, I just need to figure out how to share my screen here, and I will be glad to provide you all with a copy of this handout.
Please do, Dr. Carpenter, so I can attach it to the minutes.
You bet.
Dr. Carpenter, leave your mouse to the bottom of your window in the bottom right. There should be a button that says present now.
All right, what do you all see? There we go. It says I'm presenting. What do you all see?
School budgeting.
School budgeting. Demystified.
That's what I want you to see. Perfect. Okay, so thought it would be useful because of the time of year that we're at right now for me to just walk you through the basic 5-step, I call it back of the envelope progress or process rather, for school budgeting. The first one, and I'm going to move fast because again, these micro trainings are only really supposed to be 10 minutes, including Q&A. So I'm not going to read this to you, and we're not going to do the computations. This is an excerpt out of a workbook that I have created specifically to teach school financial management and oversight. So when I'm doing a full day workshop, you'll see the little red pencil like that at the bottom, and I actually will then take the client, we'll do the computation, but you all can refer to this later. So it really demystifies the process, in my experience, if you just think about the budgeting process as really basically just being 5 steps. Now that is a bit of an oversimplification, but as I show you these 5 steps, I think this will make sense to you. So the first step is to begin by conservatively estimating what you think your revenues are going to be next year. When I say revenues, I'm talking only about your state and federal dollars that are recurring. I call that your base revenues. I'm not talking about grants that you get that you hope you're going to get or fundraising that you might do, but your basic state and federal aid. As a rule of thumb, and keep in mind that I teach this course across the country, so there is a huge variation in state funding, but I find that $8,000 per pupil is usually a pretty good average. So I have an example here. And so what I would do as a school leader is I would conservatively estimate. So say, for example, I was running a school of 1,000 students. I would base my revenues on 950 or something really close to that. So I would build in a 5% margin of error of what I thought my actual enrollment was going to be because I want a conservative estimate. The bottom line is it's a lot easier to figure out how to spend extra money if you exceed that conservative estimate than it is to try to figure out where you're going to make cutbacks once the school year started if you don't hit your estimate. So I like a conservative estimate. So that's step 1. It's pretty easy to do. Step 2 is a step that is surprisingly to me is not does not seem to be widely recognized within charter schools, but it's to forecast your net income. And here you get to pick the number. I wish I could tell you that there was an authoritative source that says, you know, your net income should be X. Unfortunately, like a lot of things in the charter school world, there is no authoritative source for this. So what I suggest is what school leaders will typically do, and that is we will, experienced school leaders will forecast a net income of 3%. Now, just as a quick aside, and I don't want to get heavy into this, so if you don't understand it, just we'll put a pin in it for later. But keep in mind that your net income includes non-cash expenses. So when I say depreciation. When I say your net income target, what I'm really suggesting is that you forecast a 3% cash net income, or what we would actually call an accounting word, EBITDA, earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. So it's basically your cash. This is essentially your profit. Obviously, you're a nonprofit school, so we don't use the word profit, but just think, when you hear net income, just think profit. The reason you want to forecast this as your second step is you want to subtract the amount of profit that you want to make, essentially setting it aside out of your budget, so that the money that you're planning to spend is based on the amount that's remaining of the revenues after you subtracted your net income. So for example, down here at the bottom, going to my example of 950 students times $8,000 would be a $7.6 million budget in total estimated revenues. If I multiply that times 3%, that means I want to earmark $228,000 to go into my fund balance. So the fund balance is the thing that kind of becomes your rainy day reserves. And you guys have, as your auditor will share with you, I'm sure in a few moments, you guys have what I would consider to be a very healthy fund balance right now. But when you subtract that 3% from this hypothetical here, what you're really left with is $7.3 million and change. It's really critical, though, to do this as the second step, because you don't want to spend every dollar that you bring in. Otherwise, you'll either, if you're spending more than you're bringing in, you'll be depleting your fund balance or your rainy day fund, and so you don't want to do that. So that is step two, and then if you want to play with this later, like Rodney, when you and I connect, we can talk about how your finance committee could use this to help you all with your work. Step three: subtract your biggest categorical expense. That's your payroll. So there's a lot of things associated with payroll: salaries, taxes, retirement contributions, insurances, and all of that. And when I say subtract them, what I mean is the school's share of these numbers, not the employee share of like health insurance or retirement contribution. So how much is a good number? Well, all things being equal, which of course they never are, I like to see payroll costs for a charter school somewhere in the range of 60 to 65%. I find, I'm speaking in generalities here, but I find that when you get below 60%, you're probably not adequately compensating people. If you get much north of about 65%, you're either overcompensating them, which is not something that happens often in the charter school world, or what is more likely, or you're overstaffed. So 60 to 65%, I think, in talking with Dr. Edwards, I think y'all's payroll and costs or so forth are about 62%. So that would be in line with what I would expect. But the reason we're doing this step, again, is this is your single biggest categorical expense. So we're just doing some simple math. So we're backing out our net income target. We're going to back out, I use 62% in my hypothetical. And what you're left with is $2.8 million. Next, you're going to subtract your second biggest categorical expense for most schools, and that is your facilities costs. What should your costs be? Well, that depends on who you're reading. It's all over the map. The year I ran York Prep, our facilities costs were actually 23% of our budget, which is really tight. But for the sake of illustration, I use 12%, which would be a good sort of hypothetical number. Usually you can keep your facilities costs, unless you're in a high cost area, you can keep your facilities costs below 15%. So again, same math that you've seen before, but here now I've backed out my facilities cost, and I just took the 7.6 million in revenues and backed out 12%. So what that leaves me now is this $1.8 million in change for all other expenses. And this is the hard part of budgeting. This is step 5. and this is the hardest part. And if you've done budgets like I know Rodney has, and probably some of the rest of you, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say hard. It's very difficult. But all other expenses include like these 30 things. Incidentally, I highlighted things that I consider good risk management expenditures. And so the reason it's hard is because you're left with, out of that roughly $8 million we started with, you're left with less than $2 million to cover everything else. So that is basically the budgeting process for charter schools demystified. It gets complex because you get into state required chart of accounts and object and function codes for how these things have to be reported and accounted on and all of that. But in a practical sense, that's really how a school budget works. I like to do this with boards. I like to show this with boards because it's easy to, until you've done a budget, it's easy to think, oh, well, we've got $8 million or whatever the number is, or 12 million or $20 million. And it sounds like a lot of money, but when you start backing out those categorical expenses, payroll and facilities and your net income, you're really left with, less than a third of your money. And you have to do the hard work of figuring out how to allocate that across lots of different expenses. So that is the budgeting process in 5 easy steps. Questions, comments, insults, stump the chump. I can take it all.
Just one quick question, Dr. Carr, for clarity. When you, when we had some trouble about 5 years ago, when I first did analysis, we were about 75% of our fully loaded compensation as a percentage of gross revenue. It's way too high. When you reference that 60 to 65% number, are you using a fully loaded number with benefits, everything included, or are you just using salary?
Yeah, I'm using everything.
Okay. Yeah, because our fully packaged benefits usually run us about a 25% premium on top of salaries. So
right, and that is one of the variables. I'm glad you mentioned that, Rodney. That is one of the variables that, as I started out saying, I'm speaking in generalities here, but one of the variables is whether or not a school is participating in the teacher retirement system, because your contributions to that, not counting the employees part, but the school contributions to that are usually pretty expensive, certainly more expensive than the typical defined contributions plan that a school not participating in that system. And then, that leads to discussions that you hold later on in committee meetings about the relative merits of that, relative to the cost and all that. But in cases of schools, like I'm doing this workshop that was excerpted from for a school in Hawaii next week. Don't get excited. It's going to be a remote conference. And they're in the teacher retirement system. I think they're mandated to be over there in Hawaii. And so their costs are like 73%, but I'm also worried about them because I've looked at their budget and their draft budget for next year. They're already forecasting a negative net income of $100,000, over $100,000, and this is a small school too. So, being in that retirement system is expensive, and that's another conversation. But that's the long and short of budgeting for charter schools.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carpenter. Any other questions for Dr. Carpenter? We appreciate your time and appreciate the micro training, and look forward to what you're going to bring next time.
Happy to
okay,
be working with you all.
What? I'm sorry.
Happy to be working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, next under guest discourse, we have Jay Sharp to present our audit. Jay, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. So get a follow budget talk with an audit talk. So I got a short presentation to go through with the 2020 audit, and then I'll be glad to take any questions you may have after that. So I will try to share my screen. There. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. All right, so the 2020 audit status, fieldwork has been completed. The financial statements have been prepared. The audit has been submitted to the local government commission. We actually just got approval for that. So they've approved the audit with no changes for 2020. And we are currently working on a 990 tax return. That's obviously all the numbers come from the audit, and there's some additional information added to that. I always like to tell boards that the 990 is important, sometimes more important than the audit because it is public record. People can look up your 990 tax return on certain websites. We use guidestar.org to review 990s. Typically, it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months to get up on websites. These days, with the Internal Revenue Service and COVID-19, it might take longer than that. But they can review any 990s from previous years that have been filed with the IRS. And they can look at all the information from the school, including financial information. So very important that the 990 is carefully reviewed once we do get you a draft of that, which will be soon. So a little bit of roles and objectives of the auditor. We don't just test the numbers. We do some other areas. We key a lot of our procedures up front on planning the audit. And the majority of our planning has to do with internal controls. So we'll gain an understanding of key internal controls over all the major financial reporting areas of the school. We will test controls. We are required to actually test controls over cash disbursements and over payroll. That's part of the compliance supplement the state puts out. We did test controls over those two areas for 2020, and I'll talk about the results of our audit here in a second. But from our tested controls and from our understanding of all the key internal controls in place, we perform what you call a risk assessment. It's a risk-based audit approach. We're going to place risk on all the major financial reporting areas of the school. And we're going to concentrate our audit procedures on the higher risk areas. We're going to look at all the major areas, but we're going to concentrate on the higher risk areas. Those high risk areas may change year in, year out, depending on what's going on with the internal controls and depending on the results of our test controls. But it's a risk-based audit approach. We are going to perform audit procedures to obtain sufficient audit evidence to render an opinion on the financial statements. That's why you hire us, is to give an opinion on the financial statements. Without that opinion, the financial statements themselves would not mean much. People would not become comfortable that those financial statements are correct. In addition to the financial audit, for anybody that's new on the board, there is a compliance audit. Because the school receives state appropriations, you're required to have what they call a state single audit. We do certain procedures that the state tells us we have to do. I've already mentioned some of them. We do a test of controls over cash disbursements and over payroll. Some other things we do, for example, we'll look at insurance levels to make sure that the school's adequately insured. We'll look at the conflict of interest statements. You read that at the beginning of the board minutes. But there's certain items we look at that are required from the state regards to compliance. So it's not just a financial audit, it's a compliance audit also. The opinion itself, which I just talked about, concentrates on whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. This is a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. A little bit more detail on the risk assessment. Not only do we look at the control risk, we look at what we call inherent risk, which is the risk or probability that a misstatement will exist arising from any factors other than the controls. So the control risk is, there'll be a misstatement due to the controls in place. Inherent risk is basically all the other risk. And so we look at inherent risk times the control risk, and that gives us our risk and material misstatement. And as I said, we're going to assess risk on all the major financial reporting areas of the school and concentrate on audit procedures on the higher risk areas. So the results of the 2020 audit. Scope and timing of the audit, we're on track. No issues there. Obviously, we work with Acadia, who does your books, does the accounting for the school. But the compliance audit this year was a little bit different. We usually do come out to the school, but this year, because of COVID-19, we did have a virtual audit. But we do thank all the staff at the school for getting us all the compliance items we requested virtually, but the scope and timing of the audit were on track. No issues there. I'm happy to report we issued an independent auditor's report with an unmodified opinion, basically a clean opinion on the financial statements. And if there's any major issues with the financials of the school, the first place you'd see it indicated would be with the auditor's report. But I said, unmodified opinion, the best possible opinion you can receive, a clean opinion on the financial statements. Happy to report there were no findings issued this year. During our audit procedures, we noted no material weaknesses or no significant deficiencies. And so there were no findings issued either with financial reporting or compliance for 2020. So that's good news for the school. We did have 2 minor audit adjustments noted during our audit procedures, but these are really small. Obviously, if there are large adjustments, we may have a finding, but they were very minor adjustments we made during the course of our audit proceedings. All right, in addition to the audit, we issue what you call a communications letter. There's 4 major talking points with that. I'm gonna highlight here. First of all, if there's any major accounting policy changes during the year, we're required to communicate those to charge and governance. There were none in the current year. One of the areas we concentrate on are estimates. So there's some numbers that are hard and fast numbers, and there's some numbers that are estimates. Depreciation is one of those areas we look at for estimates. All the estimates here appeared reasonable, no issues there. I'm happy to report no disagreements with management and no difficulties encountered with the audit for 2020. Had complete cooperation from everybody involved with the audit. Okay, so moving on, that's kind of detailed out the highlights of the audit proceedings. Now we're going to talk about the financial highlights for 2020. So first of all, total support and revenue for the school, just above $8.1 million for 2020. Total operating expenses were just above $7.8 million. And then you had other financing sources of about $167,000, which are loan proceeds. But overall, you had a change in fund balance of $476,000 for the year ended June 30th, 2020. So a very good year for the school with that nearly $500,000 in income for 2020. So this next slide takes account for your top 5 revenue line items and your top 5 expense line items. So for revenues, these make up 98% of your total revenues. The state of North Carolina, you got revenues from them nearly $6 million for 2020. That's followed by Johnston County, just over $1.6 million. Federal funding, about $266,000. Then you had field trip revenues of about $58,000 and athletic revenues of about $54,000. So those 5 top line items made up 98% of your total revenues. Now for expenses, expenses are a little bit more diversified. You have a lot more line items with your expenses. The top 5 line items made up 90% of your total expenses. First of all, salaries and wages, just over $4 million was spent on salaries and wages. That was followed by your employee benefits, just about $1.5 million. That includes your health insurance, your retirement contributions, and then Dr. Carpenter mentioned the percentage you do belong to the state retirement fund. That percentage for 2020 that you have to give in response to all the employees is 19.27%. That has gone up sharply over the last 5 years. But that contribution rate is 19.27% for 2020. Rent, just below $800,000. Then you had contracted student services of $550,000, and finally administrative services of $176,000. So those 5 items made up 90% of your total expenses for 2020. Now, cash flows are an important statement. Unfortunately, because of the way government financial reporting works, you're not required to have a statement of cash flows for your regular operations. However, I calculated these because it's very important for a school to see where their cash flows are going. There's 3 major areas of cash flows: operating activities, investing activities, and financing activities. The number one, I think, most important line item in a financial statement that does have a statement of cash flows are cash flows from operating activities. You need to be able to generate positive cash flows for what you're in the business of doing. Now, for 2020, the school had positive cash flows from operating activities of just above $500,000. So that's a very good number. Investing activities were negative $160,000, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're taking cash and investing it back into the school in the purchases of capital assets. And finally, cash flows from financing activities were actually positive because you did have loan proceeds during 2020, and that was positive $128,000. Overall, you had a net increase in cash of $474,000 for 2020, an outstanding number for the school. So we're going next few slides are going to concentrate on some analysis on comparable years. This is revenues and expenses from the school for 2019 versus 2020. Red represents revenues, blue represents expenses. Obviously, red outpaced blue in both of the last 2 years. So you have shown a profit for both 2019 and 2020. So once again, it shows that the school is financially healthy for the last 2 years. Fund balance. So fund balance represents profitability of the school from the first day of operations through a certain time period. This graph goes back to June 30th, 2015 and flows through June 30th, 2020. Your first thing you'll notice is back in 2015 and 16, you actually had negative fund balance. The school spent more money than it received through the end of June 30th, 2015 and through the 16. After that, though, you've seen a steady progression of the school showing profits and increasing its fund balance. You passed the $2 million mark for the year ended June 30th, 2020. Steadily, progressively increased that fund balance, shows that the school is financially healthy through 2020. I said the school's come a long ways over the last several years. One of the calculations we look at involving cash is kind of what we call a cash reserve. We look at your cash balances and compare it to the prior year expenses. This does not include non-cash expenses such as depreciation. Basically, how long can you continue operating if you receive no more cash inflow? Along with your fund balance, this has increased over the last several years. For 2020, that's 70 days. Now, we generally recommend anywhere from 3 to 6 months of cash reserves in place for rainy days. Obviously, this year, with COVID-19 hitting, is a good example of why not-for-profits and charter schools should have a cash reserve in place for that rainy day. So you have increased. You were at just 3 days back in 2015, steadily increased and up to 70 days for 2020. Working capital. Here we are looking at your current assets versus your current liabilities. Are you able to pay off your current liabilities with your current assets? Once again, we see that this has increased over the years. Back in 2015, it was 1-to-1. You basically had the same amount of current assets as you did current liabilities. For 2020, you're at 28-to-1. So you have 28 times more current assets than you do current liabilities. Generally, we recommend anywhere from 2.5 to 3-to-1, so you're well above that. Once again, indicates that the school is financially healthy through 2020. Functional expense breakdown. So the next 2 slides are going to concentrate on how the school spent its money for 2020 versus 2019. We generally recommend that anywhere from 66 to 75% of expenses go toward program expense. For the school, that's instructional services. So for 2020, the blue piece of the pie represents instructional. 77% of the money you spent went toward instructional or program. So you are above that range. Only 21% went to system-wide support, followed by capital outlay at 2%. You are well above the average charter school in North Carolina. We generally see charter schools in North Carolina anywhere from 55 to 65% being spent on instructional services, and you're at 77%. So that's an outstanding number for the school to have for 2020. Last year was at the same number, 77%. So that's consistency, 2 straight years that the school has shown that it's spending its money wisely and where it's supposed to be. All right, with that, I'll be glad to take any questions you may have on the audit proceedings or the procedures or anything else.
Mr. Sharp, this is Nicole Booker. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That was very helpful. You referenced minor audit adjustments. What were those?
So one of them was reclassification entry. There were some negative accounts payable that were reclassified to receivables because liability can't be negative. It's actually money that the school was owed. The other one was the fund balance did not roll forward correctly. It was off by like less than $1,000. There was an entry we had to make to make sure that fund balance rolled forward correctly on the financial statements.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hey Jay, it's Rodney. On that asset versus liability slide, was it an increase in liabilities that changed that ratio so much for 2020?
I'd have to go back and look and let you know about that. Like I said, 28-1 is outstanding.
Yeah. I was just looking at the 2019 versus 2020 trend line, but I'll get with you offline. There were a couple of details in those slides. I just want to understand and it covers a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks, Jay.
Dr. Carpenter?
Mr. Sharp, good to talk to you again. One thing I like to ask, and I think I may have even mentioned this to you on the phone. I always like it to get the auditor to assure the board that the purpose of an audit is not to detect fraud. I don't have any suspicions, for the record. I don't have any suspicions or anything of that nature, but it's a common misperception for people to, not just board members, but for people in general, to believe that the purpose of an audit is to detect fraud if it exists. And of course, I know that as a fraud examiner, that is not the purpose of an audit. Would you just speak to that as a teachable moment, please?
Yeah, actually, I teach an audit class at Wake Tech Community College here in Raleigh, and we were just going through that with my students last week. Yeah, the purpose, obviously, of the audit is to give an opinion on the financial statements, whether they're materially correct or not. And we do try to do planning procedures in order to detect misstatements, whether they're from error or from fraud, but those are material misstatements. So, our job is not to comb through the books every transaction to determine if there's fraud or not. But we do take that into account when we're planning the audit. But that would be material misstatements, whether it's from fraud or just error.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much for the presentation. As Nicole said, it was very, very helpful. We really appreciate all the time that you clearly put into that, and it's helpful for us to see that and to hear that we're doing a good job. So thank you again for taking the time to present that to us tonight.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Absolutely. Have a great evening and a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You too. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay, so moving on from guest discourse, next is correspondence from our authorizer. Dr. Edwards, is there anything that you need to share with us from our authorizer?
This month we had 3 forms that we needed to submit to OCS. One was our enrollment admissions policy, our lottery application, and then our board membership list. And all of those have been submitted to OCS.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. And so next then is your superintendent's.
I'm sorry, Jay, let me interrupt. Sorry, what was the second, Dr. Edwards?
The lottery application.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry to move us on too quickly, Nicole. I know you're trying to get all of that down. Thank you for doing that. Are you set? Okay, yep. Perfect. All right, now Dr. Edwards, the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody. Mine is short and sweet tonight. I would like to highlight some really good news on campus. Nori Dupree was selected for the College Board National African American Recognition Program. She earned this recognition because of her remarkable academic achievements and outstanding performance on the PSAT. Mr. Chris Kaiser, our 5th grade teacher, created a virtual science fair for his students. He was able to find creative and unique ways to engage his students and to bolster their love of science. The winner will be able to participate in the 2021 North Carolina Central Region 3A Science and Engineering Fair, which will be held virtually on September, says Saturday, February 6th for the elementary students. And then finally, last week, we participated in our version of Noose Giving, which was a smashing success. Our school community really came out in force to offer their support, and we were able to give 20 individual families, which covered 38 students, holiday meal bags. We were also able to show our appreciation to our custodial staff as well as to the cafe staff at SSS by gifting them with meal bags as well. So just exceptionally grateful for the generosity of our community and allowing us to serve others in this way. And want to also highlight the work that the cheer team did alongside of student services to support and make this happen. You might have seen their video that they made that was in our NCSN news, where they were able to really advertise and highlight not only our students, but also the significant need that we have to continue to serve our community in this way. Next is an enrollment update. We are currently enrolled at 917 students. We have 460 students on our waiting list, and our ADM will hold at 942. And then finally, wanted to mention our return to school plans for semester 2. We will begin a new semester in January, and when we opened, we mentioned that we would have those plans for semester 1 and reevaluate for semester 2. And as of right now, pending any executive orders from Governor Cooper, we're going to continue on business as usual. So those are my updates, and super short and sweet.
Thank you.
Dr. Edwards, this is Michelle. When you say continue on business as usual, do you mean continue on as we are currently doing now on Plan B and Plan C?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dr. Edwards? All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Edwards, for that report. Next up is the financial report from Benji Woodard.
Thank you, Jane. The finance met on Friday, November the 20th. We reviewed the October budget results, and we also reviewed the management discussion and analysis report as was provided by Acadia. And for the month of October in our budget, we had a deficit of $101,894.43. And year to date, we are also showing a deficit, and that deficit is $191,114.57. And as we mentioned in previous meetings, we will be in arrears until we get back current with the checks from the local school system. I also wanted to give the total cash report for our cash accounts. At the end of the month of October, 10/31/2020, total cash on hand was $1,744,817.33. And that is it for the financial report.
Great. Thank you so much, Benji. Anybody have any questions for Benji on that? Dr. Carpenter?
Do y'all normally receive a balance sheet with your income statement?
Not that I'm aware of, Dr. Carpenter.
Okay.
We can talk offline if that's something that we need to do. Thank you so much. All right. Any other questions for Benji? All right. Moving on to our standing committee reports. Executive committee did not meet last month. Finance committee, their report just took place under the financial report section. Academic affairs did not meet. Resource development. Did resource development meet?
Did not meet.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Board development. Michelle?
Yes, we met 3 times thus far this month. We're planning to meet again next Monday, and I just have to say that not everyone is able to make all the meetings because we're having a lot of them working on the bylaws. But they are really the committee's doing a great job of working through this because it is a tedious process. So I really appreciate all the hard work they're putting in. We did meet on November the 2nd, November the 9th, and November the 23rd, and primarily for reviewing and going through the bylaws. Paul and I were discussing last night, I think we're about 2/3 of the way through. And I was trying to gauge, looking at where we were at, how many more meetings it was going to take us to kind of get through. And I'm estimating about 3 more development committee meetings for us to be able to hopefully get it finalized, or at least get a good draft together. Again, once those suggested revisions are made, we'll bring that to the board. One thing I did want to bring up, the 2020 amended bylaws that we did, I believe it was back this summer, they have not yet been approved. And I talked with the Office of Charter Schools I communicated with the Office of Charter Schools actually by phone and by email over the past couple of weeks. The main reason for that is that the mission statement that is in our bylaws is not consistent with the mission statement that was in the charter application. There was some confusion at the Office of Charter Schools about when the mission statement had been amended after the initial charter application, which I believe was in 2006. We did see that where there was an amendment that was submitted to the Office of Charter Schools in 2013, along with some other amendments to the charter application. There is a letter of approval from Joel Medley from the Office of Charter Schools from 2013. However, it is not signed. So I intend to communicate with the Office of Charter Schools on that next week as well. The current mission statement, as it is listed on our website and as it is listed in our existing bylaws, is the same as the 2013 mission statement that was submitted with the charter amendments, as well as the 2017 charter application renewal, with one exception. It is missing the words technology and computer information skills. So that needs to be added back in to our website, onto our website, to complete that mission statement. The other thing the Office of Charter Schools recommended to be able to go ahead and get the bylaws approved is to remove the mission statement from the bylaws. They said that it's unusual for the mission statement to be in the bylaws. And I will say that in the revisions that we are working on for our bylaws now, the mission statement is not included in those bylaws. So if we want to go ahead and get those approved by the charter school, my suggestion is that we go ahead and remove the mission statement from the bylaws. And then there's no issue as to whether it's the correct mission statement or not the correct mission statement. And when we, as we're getting that approved, then we can also kind of get down to the bottom of what is the mission statement that they have on file at the Office of Charter Schools, and make sure that's approved as well. So I would like to make a motion at this time to remove the mission statement from our bylaws.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Is there a second for her motion?
I'll second it. I was waiting on someone else that maybe wasn't in on the discussion, but I'm glad to do so.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, any discussion?
Michelle, just for the sake of the whole board, what is the purpose of going ahead and amending now versus waiting until we get all of our revisions and present our draft?
So we have already submitted the amendments to our bylaws that we modified back in 2020. And so we need to go ahead and get those approved. I know that we're obviously getting ready to go through this process all over again. But it just makes more sense to go ahead since they have already been presented for approval.
Any other questions for Michelle before we vote? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to take a roll call vote on removing the mission statement from our bylaws. Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Rodney.
Aye.
Robbie.
Aye.
Benji.
Aye.
And Paul.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So the mission statement will be removed from our current bylaws. So thank you for that, Michelle.
I will make those, delete that out and then resubmit it. And Dr. Edwards, I will probably need your assistance to get it resubmitted through Epicenter.
Anything else?
Nope, that's all for board development.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Strategic planning did not meet. And Robbie, facilities.
No meeting this month.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Moving on to ad hoc committees, the Systematic Oversight Calendar Committee. Do you all have anything that you need to report?
Yes, James. Hold on just a moment. There was a little bit of confusion on my part, and Dr. Edwards and I worked very hard on a draft, and I flubbed the drafts. But as of yesterday, we have the draft correct, and it is in the drive. And again, you know, this calendar is something that we will, you know, probably amend as we go forward, but this is our first pass. And I would like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the calendar as presented, unless anyone has any major changes they would like to make. Dr. Edwards, do you want to add anything since we last talked? Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, like, was all pretty comprehensive.
It is, and my only concern was maybe perhaps it was too comprehensive. So if there's some things we want to take off in the future, we certainly can do that. But I would like to go ahead and make a motion to approve it as presented.
I'll second it's Robbie.
And just for everyone else, sake, if you have any questions, please ask me. There are some videos on Dr. Carpenter's website that will help explain some things, but essentially it's just a self-check mechanism, and I will review it every month to make sure that we're not falling behind, and hopefully, you know, let folks know, you know, when something's coming up. So.
Jane, you're muted.
Sorry. Great. I think it will be very, very useful to have not only so that nothing falls through the cracks, but also as we go along, like you said, I think we'll probably be editing it, adding, deleting as we need to, but it should give us a really good sort of rubric for the year in terms of the recurring things, and I think that will be really helpful for everyone. So, okay. if there are no other questions or comments, we
I
will
have a
go ahead.
question, Jane.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle.
It's okay. What exactly are we approving in the document? Are we approving all of the contents of the document? The reason I'm asking is because if we're making changes to it, is this something that we will need to vote on every time we need to make a change? So I just want to be clear what we're voting on.
But Michelle, I think we will. And again, the majority of this document, in my opinion, is more management driven. And so I hope as we go through it and we start applying the calendar that Dr. Edwards and her staff will let us know if it's helpful, not helpful. But I do think we will have to amend it and vote to amend it every time, because we are approving, we're not just approving that we're going to use a strategic calendar, but that we are approving this calendar as presented.
And Nicole, is that something that you feel like we have to do, or can we just approve the format and the use of it so that Dr. Edwards has the ability to, from management's perspective, she has the ability to change it as and you as you all see fit? Because I feel like, I'm not sure, as comprehensive as it is, I'm not sure that it unless we really need to, I'm not sure that we need to, vote every time we want to change a line item in there.
Okay, that's a good question. And Dr. Carpenter, do you have any feedback on that? Maybe not.
Yes. So remember what I said in the training, the calendar, the systematic oversight calendar is iterative, meaning that you're always going to be revising it and tweaking it. And also remember that its primary purpose is to help the board organize its own work. Obviously, that involves oversight of a lot of management activities, hence Nicole's statement about it having a lot of management requirements in it. But these are recurring items, and the idea is finding the balance between too much stuff and too little stuff. But really what we're after here is a document that makes the formation of your agendas for your regular meetings almost automatic. Once your calendar is iterated after a couple of cycles, or 2 or 3 years rather, it'll pretty well flesh itself out with minor tweaks at that point. And then when the secretary sits down to write the agenda for new business, she just opens it up, goes to calendar, and if we're putting together the agenda for November, we just crosswalk the November items right to the agenda. So keep that purpose in mind. Voting on it is optional. If you want to, you can do it, but I don't think it's super critical that the board approve it or approve every single iteration of it. But I do want to emphasize this is a board-owned document. So board secretary, so Nicole, you need to stay in charge of what's actually on or not on the calendar. It's never handed off to management and say, okay, you just maintain the calendar from this point forward.
Sure. Well, with those comments, sounds like it's up to us. Do we want to approve the format, or do we want to approve the content? So, anybody have any feedback?
My thought is that I would rather approve the format and trust that you as secretary or whoever serves in that role will manage the content well. And if there are issues or questions, obviously, I think it would be absolutely fine to bring those to us. But I don't think we should hamstring you by saying that any little change that needs to happen or that you think needs to happen needs to come before the full board for a vote. But that's my thought. What does everybody else think?
Jane, this is Michelle. I agree with you on that.
All right. Well, then I will amend my motion to, unless anybody else has other comments. then I will amend my motion to just approve the format of our strategic oversight calendar.
Okay, wonderful. And so, do I have a second on the amended motion?
Second.
Okay, and so let's, I'm assuming no discussion because we just discussed it. So let's go ahead and move forward with the vote on the amended motion to approve the format of the systematic oversight calendar. Nicole,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Rodney,
Aye.
Robbie,
Aye.
Benji,
Aye.
and Paul.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. The systematic oversight calendar format has been approved and for implementation. Anything else from the SOC ad hoc committee? No. Okay. The policy committee, the ad hoc policy committee. Paul, I know Dawn is not on, was not able to attend tonight, but is there anything that you all need to share?
Yeah, we communicated about it in the last month, and spent some time going through and pulling from different sources some of the policies that exist already, and those are on the meeting drive. And if anybody wants to take a look at them, because it's let's see here, I want to go back to. It is under documents, I believe. Thanks for staying with me here. I want to make sure I get you to the right place. But if you'll go there, you'll see a file called policy. And in that, there is one, I think I just called it some like policies that I have found or Paul's found or something like that. And if you'll take a look at that, if there are any in there that you don't recognize or any that are needed, feel free to drop them in that folder. What I did is basically went through and did word searches and then looked through meeting minutes back from 13. So if anybody has anything older, that would be good. So.
Well, thank you for doing all of that. Appreciate it. Anything else on there, Paul? We need
Well, one of the things we would do is collect those, and once we have those in place, we've are fairly pleased with moving forward with the Davidson charter school approach. They have a good numbering, very simple system. And then looking at trying to format some of the policies we've got, making some comparisons based on what we have and what ours is versus that, and if there's anything of a change, it will certainly be brought to the board. I think one of the things we'll bring the whole thing to the board if there's any kind of change, any kind of word change at all. But one of the thoughts is to not change the full direction of some of the policies. So it's mainly just trying to codify what we have.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to you and to Dawn for doing all of that work to, pull everything together. So sounds like you're making really good progress and we appreciate it. So thank you. Okay. Moving on to unfinished business. The unfinished business that we have today is the motions log ad hoc committee discussion for possible action. I know this was tabled last month. As a reminder, we were discussing potentially creating a motions log and also potentially having an ad hoc committee to oversee the creation of the motions log so that we can go back and search for motions and votes that way, which should hopefully save us some time. I know that originally when we started talking about this, we were talking about going all the way back to the beginning of the school, which is quite a long time, would take a ton of time and investment to do. So in conversation with Dr. Carpenter over the last several weeks, I think that if the board would be more comfortable, it seems like it would be appropriate to potentially cut that down to going back 3 to 5 years to gather the information, at least at first. And then if we determine that we need to go back further, we might be able to do that at that time. But I think in a lot of the concerns that were raised at the last meeting about the amount of time and energy and it would take to go review motions all the way back 14 plus years makes a lot of sense. So that's something. The other thing is that I know there was conversation about who might potentially manage this, and at this time it does not sound like there is anyone currently employed at the school who is just sitting around with nothing to do, which I know doesn't surprise any of us. Everyone is working very, very hard and diligently right now. So I think if we did decide to move forward with this, we would need to, as a board, determine or have the ad hoc committee make a motion for how to proceed in terms of how to create such a motions log. So that is my understanding of sort of where we are in this conversation. Is there anything that I have of great importance that I have left out in that summary? Okay, so I know, like I said, that there was some concern about doing a motions log, given going back that far. If we were to change that to the idea of a motions log going back 3 to 5 years, does this board feel comfortable creating an ad hoc committee to look into doing that and to put forward a potential suggestion for what that would look like and how to go about getting it created?
This is Nicole. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay. Anyone have any concerns with creating an ad hoc committee to do that?
I'm just curious as to how many hours, if you start going back through the archives and search, any idea as to how many hours that you're looking at for work like that? I'm thinking maybe 16 to 20 hours maybe worth of work.
I would think at least that, probably, depending on whether it's easy to find all of the information. That could, just chasing some of that down, especially if we went beyond the 3 to 5 years. And again, I think if we were to create an ad hoc committee, if people might be willing to serve on that, I think that would be something that maybe could be determined at that point. But I hear what you're saying, Paul. I do think that it would be a significant time commitment, and that's why I think it may need to be something that we as a board decide whether we're willing to fund someone coming in and doing that work, because it would be a very significant amount of time, I believe. But I also think that in the long run, it would save us time, because we would be able to then go back and find things, for example, like changing the mission, voting on changing that or something like that. If we could go back and easily search for motions and votes that we've as a board have taken, particularly, I think this is particularly important moving forward as we work to make sure that the board's documenting everything that it is deciding and doing so in a way that when new members come on or when anyone in our community has questions, we can easily answer them, and we're being very transparent. And I don't think there's ever been any intention not to be transparent. I just think it's difficult to be able to be transparent when we can't easily put our hands or our fingers on the information. So to me, that's what the goal of the motions log is. Other questions, thoughts? Michelle, you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. As far as starting the motions log and not just going back, how do we intend to start the motions log? And I know we're going to go back, 3 to 5 years, but we need to go ahead and I guess and start it with our, currently.
Yeah, very good question. Again, I guess the way that I see this playing out, if we were to, as a board, decide to create an ad hoc committee to work on the motions log, I think Dr. Carpenter would be a fabulous resource for that committee to sort of help get them started in terms of what the structure of that log would look like, what steps to take, and sort of how to go about that. I know he's done that and helped other charter school boards do the same thing. So I think his insights and help would be invaluable. And so again, I'm not sure that I know the answer to that question right this second, but I do think that if we were to create an ad hoc committee, that we could, Dr. Carpenter could work with them, and then they could come back and tell us, tell the full board sort of what steps need to be taken and when.
Dr. Carpenter, I think all you need is just to send us a go by. I mean, it's just a spreadsheet, isn't it?
Yeah, and I actually have the template on my website with those videos.
Yeah.
If I can add to what you were saying, Madam Chair, this is one of those projects that you can just kind of get to it, but sooner or later it's a good idea to get to it, if not now, not in the not too distant future, because there will come up from time to time questions where someone like you gave the example of, when did we vote on the mission statement change? And with a motions log, you could go in and just search on the keywords or the tags, and you'd have every single vote that there ever was on something like that. So it's also not something that you're going to be referencing like, every week or even every month. But when you do want to find something out of significance, like that example that you gave, it's an awful handy little tool to have. As far as a committee goes, I would just recommend that you all farm this out to a temporary worker or something for a few bucks. I can't give you an estimate of the hours. There are some hours involved. It depends. First of all, if your minutes are searchable and can be located. If the minutes aren't searchable, then you're actually having to read through the minutes, and that makes it super labor intensive. But this is basically clerical work, and for this, particularly for this board here, this is y'all's personal pay grade, and what you do in your day lives is way beyond clerical work. So you could form a committee to or appoint a board member to supervise the process, but I would personally recommend just farming it out to a clerical support person.
Great, thank you so much.
Don't spend your $75 an hour time or whatever you value your time at doing essentially a $10 hour work. That's sort of one of my mottos.
It's about, I think it's about a 30-minute conversation. If Dr. Edwards, I mean, you got enough on your plate, and I don't have that much, I guess, going on. Whatever I feel like I do, but maybe we can just talk a little bit and kind of figure that out, because I think it's as part of that, we'd want to take and scan all the minutes, and you've got the Adobe standard, and you scan it to recognize characters. That's the first thing you do. You file it, then you search it, then you fill it out.
Paul,
So-
do I hear you volunteering to
No,
chair
no
the ad
committee.
hoc
No
committee?
committee. We'll have a conversation. No committees. No.
Okay, all
We'll have
right.
on enough committees. We'll have a conversation and talk about it, because I think I got an idea of how to do it, and it shouldn't be that hard. And then maybe we got a couple of good students we could hire temporarily or something. I don't know how we can do that, but just need one to do the work, one to do QA/QC.
Perfect. I understood half of that, so I'm glad that you have this great plan.
We'll talk about it, and I probably won't have much of a report to give on it. We'll just talk about it, figure it out.
Well, I do think that at some point we'll need to vote on if we decide to hire someone. For that. But is everyone comfortable with tabling this until the next meeting and letting Paul and Dr. Edwards talk offline and come back with a plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Remind me. Tabling requires a motion.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was just getting ready to ask. I thought so. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to table this piece of business until our next meeting.
So moved. This is Michelle.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, this is Benji.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Benji. All right. Any discussion? All right. I'm going to move forward with the vote to table this motions log discussion until the next meeting. Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Rodney.
Aye. Aye.
Robbie.
Aye.
Benji. Oh, sorry, Robbie. Benji.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. This is tabled until our next meeting. Okay, new business. The only thing under new business that we need to discuss is meeting with the facilities board. As I let the members of the board know, we did have a request from the News Charter School Facilities Board for the two boards to meet annually to share information and ensure that we're all informed and up to speed and working, that the two boards are working well and in conjunction with each other. So at this point, does anyone have any questions about that? If not, I will entertain a motion I'll entertain a motion to meet with the News Charter School Facilities Board annually.
Ms. Booker, so moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mr. Robbie, second.
Thank you, Robbie. Any discussion, questions, thoughts? Okay, we'll move forward with a vote to agree to have an annual meeting between the News Charter School Board of Directors and the News Charter School Facilities Board. Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Rodney.
Aye.
Robbie.
Aye.
Benji.
Aye.
And Paul.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So we will reach out to the News Charter School Facilities Board and determine a time that works for both boards to schedule that first annual meeting. So thank you for that. Okay, there's nothing under ongoing board development and self-assessment. We did our board development in our micro training. So we are now at the point to move into closed session. We do need to move to closed session, correct, Dr. Edwards?
Yes.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
We need to specify the reasoning for going.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so we need to go into closed session for personnel discussion pursuant to News Charter, North Carolina General Statute. Sorry, I see NC and I think News Charter. Okay, going into closed session for personnel discussion pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A6. Now, do I have a motion to go into closed session for that purpose, please?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All
You have a
right.
second and a third, Jane.
Sorry.
You have a
Thank
second and a
you.
third.
All right, perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on going into closed session. Nicole,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Rodney,
Aye.
Robbie,
Aye.
Benji,
Aye.
and Paul. Paul, did you say aye?
Aye.
Okay, sorry.
I didn't hear you.
That's okay, my fault. Okay, so we will now go into closed session, and I will see you all there. Thank you so much. All right, so now that we're all here, we can go ahead and I will entertain a motion to approve the personnel recommendations made by Dr. Edwards in closed session.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. All right. And I will go ahead and call the roll for the vote. Nicole,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Rodney, Benji,
Aye.
and Paul.
Aye.
Okay, wonderful. Motion carries. So those personnel recommendations are approved. And seeing that we have gotten to the end of our agenda, I hereby state that the News Charter School Board of Directors meeting is adjourned at 7:56 p.m. on November 24th. Everyone have a wonderful evening and a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
You all.